Chapter 5. The second letter. It was Frances Marsh, at Miss Holt's gentle suggestion, who telephoned her mother's solicitor the following morning, a Mr. Aubrey Latch of Latch and Pryor, a firm so old-fashioned it still used blotting paper and addressed its clients, invariably by their full names. Mrs. Evelyn Marsh, Frances repeated twice into the receiver, her voice steadier than Miss Holt had yet heard it. Yes, I understand she was a client of yours. I'm calling because we've found some papers here at the house, and I wondered whether she'd left anything with you, anything meant to be opened. There was a pause on the line, long enough that Miss Holt, seated across the room with her tea gone cold beside her, could see the exact moment the answer arrived, in the small straightening of Frances's shoulders. There is, Frances said, covering the receiver with one hand. He says there's a letter. Mr. Latch, when Miss Holt took the telephone herself, proved to be a precise and faintly apologetic man who explained at some length, and with evident discomfort at having to explain it at all, that Evelyn Marsh had lodged a sealed letter with his firm 11 weeks earlier, with written instructions that it be opened and delivered only in the event of her death, and only if that death occurred within 6 months of the letter being lodged. An unusual instruction, Miss Holt observed. Unusual, but not unheard of, said Mr. Latch. Clients occasionally leave such things. Most of the time they are never needed, and we destroy them, unopened on the expiry of whatever term the client has set. I confess I did not expect to be delivering this particular one so soon after it arrived. Did she say why she wished it lodged for 6 months and not longer? She did not confide in me, Miss Holt. Solicitors are not generally told the why of a thing, only the what and the when. I can tell you only that she seemed, when she brought it in herself, in a great hurry to have it done, and rather less inclined than most of my clients to make conversation about it afterward. The letter arrived at Larch Row by 11:30, delivered by Mr. Latch's own clerk on a bicycle, sealed in a stiff cream envelope with Evelyn's small, careful hand across the front, addressed not to Frances, nor to the police, but simply to whoever reads this after me, a phrase that made even Inspector Bray, who had seen a great many strange things in his years on the force, go quiet for a moment before he nodded for Miss Holt to open it. She read it aloud to the assembled household, in the same sitting room where she had heard 4 small lies the day before, and where this time no one interrupted her, not once, from the first word to the last. Evelyn's second letter was not funny, the way the obituary had pretended to be. It was plain, careful, and clearly written by a woman who suspected she was running out of time and wanted, above all else, to be believed after she no longer could speak for herself. She wrote that she had noticed, some months before, a pattern to her own poor health, one that improved without fail whenever she was away from home, at conferences, at her sister Constance's house in Bath, and worsened just as reliably within days of returning to Larch Row. She wrote that she had told herself at first that this was simply the anxiety of travel giving way, on her return, to the comfort of routine, and that it had taken her a shamefully long time to consider the less comfortable explanation. She wrote that she loved Mrs. Coombs, had trusted her for 20 years, had leaned on her through a divorce and a decade of solitary evenings in a house too large for one person, and that she found it nearly impossible to believe what her own careful notes seemed increasingly to be telling her. This was, she confessed, precisely why she had told no one, not Frances, not her doctor, not even her sister, fearing that she was simply an old woman inventing conspiracies out of loneliness and too much of her own fiction. She wrote that she had learned, 3 weeks before the letter was lodged, of a codicil to her late sister's estate, a codicil she had stumbled upon entirely by accident while helping Constance settle some family papers, one that named Mrs. Coombs as beneficiary of a small trust, a sum not enormous but not negligible either, conditional on Evelyn's own death occurring before a certain date. That date, Evelyn had since discovered through a conversation with the same family solicitor who had drawn up the codicil years before, corresponded to a legal deadline she herself had only recently learned of, and one she now believed with a growing and unwelcome certainty that Mrs. Coombs had known about for a great deal longer than she had ever let on. I do not know when she learned of it, Evelyn had written, or whether the knowledge came upon her slowly or all at once. I know only that once I understood what the codicil meant, and once I set it beside my own notes, beside the mornings I felt clearest away from this house and the mornings I felt least myself within it. I could no longer explain away what I had, for months, been trying very hard to explain away. She wrote that if she was wrong, she hoped never to need this letter at all, that it might simply sit in Mr. Latch's safe until its 6 months expired and be quietly destroyed, and that she would count herself fortunate to have been, in the end, nothing more than a frightened old woman with too vivid an imagination. And if she was right, she wrote, then she wanted it known plainly, in her own words, in her own hand, and not left to guesswork or gossip after she was gone. She did not wish to be remembered only as a body found at a desk. She wished, if it came to it, to have the last word after all, and to have it be true. The obituary, she explained in the letter's final paragraph, had been her insurance, a second and quieter safeguard laid beside the first. If something happened to her on or near the date she feared, she wanted the timing itself to raise a question that a quiet, ordinary death of an old woman with a weak heart would never raise on its own, not with a country doctor already inclined to sign the certificate without a second glance. A joke on the surface, harmless enough to be filed away and forgotten by a busy newspaper editor. A flare sent up underneath it by a woman who no longer trusted her own house to tell the truth for her, and who had, in the last months of her life, learned to trust paper and pencil a great deal more than she trusted the people who brought her breakfast. When Miss Holt finished reading, the room stayed silent for a long moment. It was Frances who spoke first, her voice thin. She knew, Frances said. All this time, she knew, and she never said a word to me. She was not yet certain, said Miss Holt, folding the letter carefully back along its original creases. There is a considerable distance, Miss Marsh, between suspecting a thing in the small hours of the night and being willing to say it aloud to a woman one has trusted for 20 years, particularly when saying it aloud might mean losing a friendship built over half that trust, and being wrong about it besides. Your mother chose, in the end, to let paper carry the risk that speaking would not. It was not silence exactly. It was simply courage of a quieter kind than we are used to admiring. Across the room, Mrs. Coombs had gone very still, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past Miss Holt's shoulder, and it was in that stillness, more than in anything yet said aloud, that Miss Holt found herself finally certain of what the last 4 days had been building toward.